Hey there, fellow dopamine addicts! Yes, you heard me right. Addicts. Before you click away in denial, let me ask you this. How many times have you scrolled through TikTok, desperately seeking that next hit of fleeting joy? How many browser tabs do you have open right now, promising to be productive later? We live in a world overflowing with pleasure, and guess what? Our brains are drowning in it. This, my friends, is The Crux of Dopamine Nation, a book by Stanford psychiatrist Anna Lembke. Don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. Think of it as a hilarious yet slightly terrifying expose of our collective addiction to, well, everything. Lembke takes us on a wild ride through the science of dopamine, the feel-good neurotransmitter that's supposed to reward us for, actually doing things to survive, like eating and procreating. But in our modern world of instant gratification, we've figured out ways to hack the system, and our poor brains are struggling to keep up. Now you might be thinking, hey you, the beautiful, slightly unhinged man, what makes this Lembke lady an expert on my life? Well, buckle up, because she's got the receipts. Lembke has spent years on the front lines of the addiction crisis, treating patients struggling with everything from substance abuse to tech dependence. And let me tell you, this book is packed with real-life stories that are both heartbreaking and relatable. We're talking about people whose lives have been hijacked by their own brain chemistry, folks who can't tear themselves away from video games, online shopping, or even, wait for it, tanning beds. But don't think for a second that Lembke is here to judge. She approaches the topic with a healthy dose of humor and empathy, recognizing that we're all just trying to navigate this crazy, dopamine-drenched world the best we can. So what can you expect from this whirlwind tour of Dopamine Nation? Get ready for some serious aha moments as Lembke connects the dots between our seemingly harmless habits and the larger societal forces at play. We'll explore the science behind addiction, debunk common myths about willpower and self-control, and delve into the very real consequences of living in a world designed to keep us perpetually hooked. All right, let's talk about dopamine, the chemical equivalent of that friend who's always down for a good time. Imagine a tiny party animal living in your brain, except instead of tequila shots, it gets off on anything remotely pleasurable. Eating a slice of pizza? Dopamine's doing the Macarena on your taste buds. Acing that exam you barely studied for? Dopamine's popping confetti in your prefrontal cortex. Getting a notification on that dating app you're slightly ashamed of? Oh boy, dopamine's throwing a full-blown rave in your reward center. Now, dopamine isn't inherently bad. In fact, it's crucial for survival. Back in the caveman days, dopamine ensured we ate when we were hungry, slept when we were tired, and, reproduced before getting eaten by saber-toothed tigers. It's all about seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. A pretty solid game plan when you're dodging predators and foraging for berries. The dopamine seesaw, pleasure and pain, a never-ending cycle. But here's the catch, our brains are wired for balance. For every dopamine-fueled high, there's an equal and opposite low waiting in the wings. Think of it like a seesaw. The higher you go on the pleasure side, the harder you crash down on the other. Remember that pizza that made your dopamine do the Macarena? Yeah, well now it's giving you heartburn and a side of guilt. And that notification from the dating app? Turns out it was just your weird aunt asking if you found a nice partner yet. Cue the dopamine crash, complete with feelings of emptiness, anxiety, and a sudden urge to crawl under your weighted blanket and disappear. This constant chasing after the next dopamine hit, followed by the inevitable crash, is what Lembke refers to as the dopamine seesaw. And trust me, it's a wild ride that can leave you feeling exhausted, depleted, and strangely unfulfilled. Hacking the system. How we've tricked our brains into wanting more. Now here's where things get interesting. And by interesting, I mean terrifying. We live in a world specifically designed to exploit our dopamine-driven desires. Companies have spent billions of dollars figuring out how to hijack our brain chemistry and keep us hooked on their products and services. Think about it. Social media algorithms that keep you scrolling for hours, video games that offer endless rewards, and streaming services that autoplay the next episode before you even have time to process what you just watched. It's like we're living in a giant dopamine buffet, and the food is laced with addictive additives. And the worst part? We've become so accustomed to this constant stimulation that even the simplest things, like reading a book or having a face-to-face conversation, can feel boring and unrewarding. Our brains have developed a sort of dopamine tolerance, meaning we need increasingly intense experiences to feel even a fleeting sense of pleasure. From cavemen to couch potatoes, a brief history of dopamine hijacking. But hey, don't beat yourselves up too much. It's not entirely our fault. Our brains haven't quite caught up to the rapid-fire pace of modern life. Remember those cavemen ancestors of ours? They were content with the occasional berry binge or a successful mammoth hunt. They didn't have smartphones, Netflix, or two-day shipping. Fast forward a few thousand years, and here we are, drowning in a sea of digital dopamine. Our brains, still wired for a simpler time, are struggling to keep up with this constant onslaught of stimulation. It's like trying to run a marathon with a Stone Age fitness regimen. You're bound to hit a wall eventually. Tales from the dopamine trenches. Real people, real addictions, really funny and sad stories. Buckle up, buttercups, because Lembke doesn't hold back in the storytelling department. She introduces us to characters battling their own dopamine demons, and these stories are both hilarious and heartbreaking. We meet a woman addicted to tanning beds. She knows it's bad, but that artificial glow, pure dopamine gold. Then there's the guy who can't stop playing video games, and the woman hooked on online shopping. The thrill of the purchase? A dopamine rush she can't resist. These stories highlight a universal truth: addiction doesn't discriminate. The smartphone siren song. How our phones became our digital drug dealers. Let's be real, folks. Our smartphones have become extensions of ourselves, like extra limbs we can't seem to function without. We sleep with them, eat with them, and sometimes even take them to the bathroom with us. Don't lie, you've done it too. But here's the thing. Those pocket-sized devices are specifically designed to keep us hooked. Every notification, every swipe is like a tiny dopamine hit, and we've become Pavlovian dogs, salivating at the mere sound of a buzz or a ping. And social media? Don't even get me started. It's like a digital Skinner box, rewarding our every post and comment with a fleeting sense of validation and belonging. We scroll and scroll, desperately seeking that next hit of dopamine, completely oblivious to the fact that we're being played like a fiddle by algorithms designed to keep us glued to our screens. Swipe right on disaster. When love and validation come with a side of endless scrolling. Speaking of social media, let's talk about dating apps, shall we? They promised us love, connection, and maybe even a decent hookup or two. But what have they delivered? We swipe and swipe, our thumbs getting a workout while our hearts wither away. And don't even get me started on the ghosting. It's enough to make you want to swear off love altogether and invest in a cat cafe. But here's the kicker. We keep coming back for more. Why? You guessed it. Dopamine. That little rush of excitement when we get a match. Beyond the screen. From tanning beds to treadmills, addiction knows no bounds. Now, before you think this is just a millennial tech rant, let me assure you, Dopamine Nation isn't just about our love-hate relationship with our devices. Lembke makes it clear that addiction can take many forms, and it's not always about substances or even technology. Remember that woman hooked on tanning beds? She's not alone. People can become addicted to all sorts of things. Exercise, work, shopping, even those little packets of sugar you get at the coffee shop. Don't judge, we've all been there. The point is, addiction is about more than just the object of our obsession. It's about the way our brains are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain, and how easily that wiring can be hijacked in a world that's constantly pushing our buttons. Pause. Welcome to the United States of distraction, where focus is a four-letter word. All right, folks, let's talk about the elephant in the room, or rather, the elephant scrolling through Instagram while simultaneously trying to have a conversation with you. We live in the United States of distraction, a glorious nation built on the foundation of instant gratification, where focus is about as rare as a unicorn wearing a business suit. Remember the days when you could actually sit through a movie without checking your phone every 5 minutes? Or have a meal without documenting it for your adoring Instagram followers? Those days, my friends, are gone, vanished into the digital ether along with our attention spans. We've become masters at the art of multitasking, juggling work emails, social media notifications, and online shopping sprees with the grace of a caffeinated octopus. The joyless grind, when more is never enough. In our relentless pursuit of pleasure, we've become bad at experiencing it. The more we indulge, the higher our tolerance, and the less we enjoy. By the time you're halfway through the box, the pleasure diminishes. We're chasing the next high, but it leaves us feeling empty and unfulfilled. We're running on a hedonic treadmill where the finish line keeps moving. From burnout to broken brains, the consequences are real. You might be thinking, hey you, the lovable cynic, you're being dramatic, right? But this constant overstimulation comes at a price. It's not just about feeling frazzled or checking your phone too often. Lembke highlights the real consequences of a dopamine-driven world: increased anxiety, depression, insomnia, and burnout. Our brains are struggling, affecting our mental and physical health. Canary in the coal mine. Why our dopamine addiction is a societal crisis. But here's the kicker. Our collective dopamine addiction isn't just a personal problem. It's a societal crisis in the making. When we're constantly plugged in, chasing the next dopamine hit, we become disconnected from ourselves, from each other, and from the world around us. We lose our ability to focus, to empathize, to engage in meaningful conversations. We become more susceptible to misinformation, more polarized in our views, and less capable of addressing the complex challenges facing our world. Think about it. How can we possibly tackle issues like climate change, social injustice, or political polarization when we can't even sit through a meeting without checking our phones? Our dopamine addiction is eroding the very fabric of our society, and it's time we start paying attention. Unplug and play. Reclaiming your brain from the dopamine overloads. All right, folks, before you start building a pillow fort to hide from the horrors of modern life, let's talk solutions. Dopamine Nation isn't just a doom and gloom expose of our collective addiction. It's a call to action, a roadmap for reclaiming our brains from the clutches of the dopamine overload. Lembke argues that the key to finding balance in our dopamine-drenched world is to rediscover the joy of unplugging. And no, I don't mean trading your smartphone for a flip phone and moving to a remote cabin in the woods, although, let's be honest, that does sound kind of tempting. Unplugging, in Lembke's world, is about creating space in your life for activities that don't involve screens, notifications, or the constant pursuit of the next dopamine hit. Remember the simple pleasures? Reading a book, going for a walk, having a face-to-face conversation with an actual human being? Yeah, those things still exist, and they're surprisingly satisfying. The power of just enough, finding the sweet spot between pleasure and pain. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey you magnificent bastard, you're asking me to give up my precious dopamine hits? What am I, a masochist? But here's the thing. Lembke isn't suggesting we become joyless robots who shun all forms of pleasure. It's about finding the sweet spot, that delicate balance between indulgence and restraint. Think of it like this. Remember that first bite of pizza we talked about? The one that sent your dopamine into a frenzy? That, my friends, is the power of just enough. It's about savoring the experience, appreciating the pleasure without needing to devour the entire box, and then hating yourself afterward. The same principle applies to everything in life. We can still enjoy our favorite shows, indulge in a delicious meal, or scroll through our social media feeds occasionally. The key is to do so mindfully, with intention, and without letting those activities control our lives. Dopamine detox. It's not as scary or as restrictive as it sounds. Now, for those of you who are ready to take the plunge and reset your dopamine receptors, Lembke offers a radical yet surprisingly effective solution: the dopamine detox. Don't worry, it's not as extreme as it sounds. You don't have to move to a monastery and vow celibacy, although, again, tempting. A dopamine detox is simply a period of time. Lembke recommends starting with 30 days, where you abstain from a specific activity that you suspect is hijacking your brain chemistry. It could be social media, video games, online shopping, or even that extra cup of coffee you rely on to function. The goal is to give your brain a break, to reset those dopamine receptors, and to rediscover the joys of simpler pleasures. It's about breaking free from the cycle of craving and indulgence, and reclaiming control over your time, your attention, and your life. Building a better brain: simple steps for a more balanced and fulfilling life. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey you, the brilliant one, slightly unhinged genius. This all sounds great in theory, but how do I actually implement these changes in my real, messy, dopamine-addled life? Well, fear not, my friends, because Lembke provides a whole toolbox of practical strategies for building a better, more balanced brain. She emphasizes the importance of establishing healthy boundaries with technology, setting aside specific times for work, play, and rest, and cultivating mindfulness in our daily lives. She also encourages us to reconnect with our values, to pursue activities that bring us genuine joy and fulfillment, and to prioritize face-to-face interactions over digital connections. The journey to dopamine balance isn't about deprivation or perfection. It's about making small, sustainable changes that add up to a richer, more meaningful life. It's about reclaiming our time, our attention, and our ability to experience the world in all its messy, complicated, and ultimately beautiful glory. The Dopamine Balancing Act. It's not about deprivation, it's about freedom. So there you have it, folks. A crash course in Dopamine Nation, a book that's both hilarious and terrifying, insightful and empowering. Lembke doesn't want you to live a life devoid of pleasure, hunched over a flickering candle, subsisting on raw vegetables and self-loathing. It's about recognizing that we've been sold a lie, the lie that more is always better, that happiness can be found at the bottom of a shopping cart or in the next swipe of a dating app. It's about understanding the seductive power of dopamine, how it can both enhance and hijack our lives, and how to reclaim our agency in a world designed to keep us perpetually hooked. The Dopamine Balancing Act isn't about deprivation. It's about freedom. It's about breaking free from the tyranny of instant gratification, the endless cycle of craving and indulgence, and rediscovering the joy of just enough. Taking back control. You are not a slave to your brain chemistry. Well, mostly not. Here's the good news. You are not a slave to your brain chemistry. You have the power to rewire your brain, to reset your dopamine receptors, and to cultivate a healthier, more balanced relationship with pleasure. It won't be easy, mind you. Breaking up with your phone is hard. Resisting that second slice of pizza is a Herculean effort. And explaining to your friends why you're suddenly an advocate for digital minimalism is its own special kind of torture. But trust me, it's worth it. Because on the other side of that initial discomfort, that withdrawal from the constant dopamine drip, lies a world of deeper satisfaction, more meaningful connections, and a profound sense of freedom. You'll find joy in the simple things, rediscover the power of your own attention, and finally be able to finish a book without checking your phone every 5 minutes. Probably. Go forth and be mindful, but not in an annoying way. Embrace the challenge of finding balance in our age of indulgence. Unplug, detox, and rediscover the joy of just enough. Go for a walk in nature. Have a conversation without emojis or abbreviations. If you like this video, smash the like button and subscribe for more such videos. We're all in this together.